High on a hill wrapped in a fog nearly all year round, there was a village so small that maps often forgot it. They called it Hollow Vale because it sat in a deep fold between two mountains, as if the earth itself had hidden it on purpose. There lived a man named Anselm, the watchmaker, and it is his story we are about to tell. Anselm had the steadiest hands anyone in those parts had ever seen. He repaired pocket watches, wall clocks, church clocks, and people said, half joking, that he could fix time itself, if only someone brought him the right piece. His shop stood on the main square, its window filled with golden gears that turned without end, as though they were forever counting something important. But there was one clock Anselm could never repair, the clock of his own life. 20 years earlier, Anselm had a brother, Vincent, 2 years younger, loud, the kind who laughed too easily and made promises he didn't always keep. The two of them had inherited their father's workshop, and for a while worked side by side, each at his own bench, until the day Vincent, in debt to a dangerous man from the city, opened the iron drawer where Anselm kept the family's savings, money set aside to buy the house next door, where one day Anselm's daughter would live when she was grown, and took it all. He left no note. He never asked forgiveness. He simply vanished into the fog, as if the mountain itself had swallowed him. Anselm never spoke his brother's name aloud again. When people asked, he would only point to some clock on the wall and say, "That one's running slow," and the conversation would die there. But inside, Anselm's own clock wasn't running slow. It had stopped at the exact hour he found the drawer empty. The years went by. Anselm's daughter, Iolanda, grew up watching her father bent over magnifying lenses and tweezers, always gentle with his customers, always attentive to the smallest detail of every gear, but carrying an old silence in his chest, like a spring nobody ever wound again. It was on a late autumn afternoon, when the leaves in the square looked like small flames falling slowly, that a stranger walked into the shop. He was thin, unshaven, wearing a coat too large for his frame. Wrapped in a worn cloth, he carried a battered pocket watch, its glass cracked down the middle. "Can you fix this?" he asked, barely lifting his eyes. Anselm picked up the watch, turning it in his hands, and something inside him began to turn more slowly too, like a gear catching. He recognized the watch before he recognized the face. It was the very watch he himself had given his brother on his 18th birthday. "Vincent," he said quietly, almost without meaning to let the name escape. The man raised his eyes, and in them were 20 years of the road, of restless regret, of doors closed in one town after another. "I didn't come to ask for anything," Vincent said quickly, as if he'd rehearsed the line 1,000 times on the way there. "I just wanted the watch fixed, and if I could, just see you from a distance. I was going to leave right after." Anselm set the watch on the counter with an almost reverent care. His hand, so steady when handling strangers' machinery, trembled now before that all-too-familiar object. 20 years, Anselm said, his voice harder than he meant it to be. 20 years, Vincent. Do you know what happened to the house we were going to buy? I never bought it. Do you know what happened to the trust I used to have in people? I never bought that back either." Vincent lowered his head. He didn't defend himself. He simply stood there, small before his older brother, like a boy waiting for a punishment he knew he deserved. "I know," he said. "I have no excuse. I lost everything I stole in a single night of gambling that very week. I spent 20 years trying to forget what I did, and I never could. Every clock I saw on the street reminded me of you. The That's why I kept this one, even broken. It was the only thing I had left from when we were still truly brothers. That night, Anselm couldn't sleep. He sat in the workshop, staring at Vincent's watch on the bench, its gears exposed, waiting for a hand that knew how to return it to motion. It was then he remembered something his grandmother used to say, decades before. Sitting on the porch with her Bible open on her lap, that Peter once asked Jesus how many times he should forgive a brother who wronged him, whether 7 times would be enough. And Jesus answered that it wasn't 7, but 70 times 7. Not because the number itself mattered, his grandmother would say, but because the answer meant just one thing, that forgiveness wasn't something to be counted, like coins added up in a drawer. It was meant to be given the way you'd give water to someone thirsty, without keeping track of how much you'd already given. Anselm also remembered another story his grandmother used to tell, about a father who had 2 sons, and the younger one asked for his inheritance early, left home, spent it all on reckless living, and came back ashamed, expecting to be taken in only as a servant. But his father, seeing him still far off on the road, ran to meet him. He didn't wait for explanations. He didn't demand the son kneel first. He ran. It must have been hard for that father, Anselm thought, looking at the gears scattered across the bench like tiny metal stars. He had every right to be angry too, but he chose to run instead. Anselm understood then that 20 years of silence had repaired nothing at all. They had only kept that same painful instant alive inside him, replayed every single day, like a broken clock stuck forever, announcing the same wrong hour. The next morning, he went looking for his brother at the village's small inn, where Vincent had spent the night sitting on a wooden bench, too ashamed to lie down, as if he didn't deserve rest. "Come with me," Anselm said. He brought him to the workshop. They sat side by side, the way they used to when they were young, each at his own bench. Anselm picked up the broken watch, examined the gears one by one, cleaned away 2 decades of dust, replaced the spring that had lost its strength, and set the cracked glass back in place with the same tenderness he gave to everything he loved. As he worked, he said, without looking at his brother, "I spent 20 years waiting for you to come back, just so I could tell you how much you hurt me. I kept that speech ready, rehearsing it like someone preparing an important address. But now that you're here, I realize I don't want to say any of those words anymore. I just want for us to go on." Vincent wept, right there, in the workshop full of ticking clocks, like a man finally able to set down a weight he had carried for far too long. "I don't deserve this," he said. "Nobody ever truly deserves it," Anselm answered. "That's exactly why it's called forgiveness and not payment. If it were payment, it would just be justice. Forgiveness is generosity." He finished the repair as evening fell. He wound the watch, and it began to tick again, small and stubborn, like a heart starting to beat after a long time standing still. Anselm handed it back to his brother. "It keeps the right time again now," he said. "Just like us." Vincent stayed in the village. At first, he worked as an assistant in the shop, learning again the craft he had abandoned along with his family. It wasn't easy. There were days when the old anger returned to Anselm like a passing shadow. Days when the villagers whispered, remembering what Vincent had done. But Anselm learned that forgiving wasn't a single instant, like erasing a number from a ledger. It was more like winding a clock every single day, one that always wants to run late. It demanded repetition. It demanded a choice renewed, morning after morning. Iolanda, who had witnessed that reunion as a little girl, grew up watching her uncle fix clocks beside her father, the two of them laughing quietly at the same old jokes, as if the lost time, in some strange way, had been given back to them in pieces. Never whole, never quite whole, but enough. Years later, grown, she was the one who inherited the shop. And whenever someone curious asked why there sat on the main counter a simple pocket watch, its glass still holding a thin, almost invisible crack, she always gave the same answer. My father never let anyone replace that glass. He used to say the crack was part of the story, that sometimes what's broken doesn't need to be made perfect again to start working. It just needs someone willing to wind it once more. They say in Hollow Vale that even now, if you walk past the old watch shop's window at dusk, you'll see dozens of clocks turning all at once, each one marking a slightly different hour, because no clock is perfect, and neither is any family. But every one of them, without exception, keeps moving forward. And that, in the end, is what forgiveness does. It doesn't erase the crack. It doesn't give back the lost time. It doesn't pretend the pain never happened. It simply winds again what had stopped and lets the clock keep marking the hours. Imperfect, mended, but alive.